Nandi Haribo Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Padavrajaka Acharya Asatara Sri Srimad ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakahosh Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Giradhara Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopanath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Shukmini Dwarkanath Ki Jai. Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai. Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai. Samabheta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Going back to home, back to Godhead Ki Jai. ISKCON Los Angeles Yatra Ki Jai. Brihad Madanga Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. International Food for Life Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Haribo. All glories to the assembly devotees. All glories to the assembly devotees. All glories to the assembly devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Gaur Srila Prabhupada. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhiraya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God and Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, who is the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regularly attending the Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, whose worship with transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're continuing our reading from the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is chapter 2. Today's text is 11. Pradarshaya tapta tapasam avitripta drisham nurinam adayantar adhad yas tu swa bimbam loka lochanam pradarshaya tapta tapasam avitripta drishang nrinam adayantar adhadyastu sabimbam lokalochanam pradarshaya tapta tapasam avitripta drishang nrinam adayantar adhadyastu sabimbam lokalochanam pradarshaya tapta tapasam avitripta drishang nrinam adayantar adhadyastu sabimbam lokalochanam. Please chant. yastu sabimbang lokalochana padashaya tapta tapasa Narayantar Hadyastu Sabimbam Lokalochanam. Vaishnavis. Sabimbam Lokalochanam. So, synonyms: Pradarsha, by exhibiting; Atapta, without undergoing; Tapasam, penances; Avitripta Drisham, without fulfillment of vision; Nrinam, of persons; Adaya, talking; Antaha, is it talking or taking? Taking. Yeah, this phone text is a little small. Adaya, taking. Antaha, disappearance. Adhat, performed. Yaha, he who. To, but. Sabimbam, his own form. Lokalochanam, public vision. Srila Prabhupada's translation for this verse: Lord Sri Krishna, who manifested his eternal form before the vision of all on the earth, performed his disappearance by removing his form from the sight of those who were unable to see him as he is, due to not executing required penance. Please repeat. Lord Sri Krishna, who manifested his eternal form before the vision of all on the earth, performed his disappearance by removing his form from the sight of those who were unable to see him as he is, due to not executing required penance. Srila Prabhupada's purport. In this verse, the word avitripta drisham is most significant. The conditioned souls in the material world are all trying to satisfy their senses in various ways, but they have failed to do so because it is impossible to be satisfied by such efforts. The example of the fish on land is very appropriate. If one takes a fish from the water and puts it on the land, it cannot be made happy by any amount of offered pleasure. The spirit soul can be happy only in the association of the Supreme Living Being, the Personality of Godhead, and nowhere else. The Lord, by his unlimited causeless mercy, has innumerable Vaikuntha planets in the Brahmajyoti sphere of the spiritual world, and in that transcendental world there is an unlimited arrangement for the unlimited pleasure of the living entities. The Lord himself comes to display his transcendental pastimes, typically represented at Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwaraka. He appears just to attract the conditioned souls back to Godhead, back home to the eternal world. But for want of sufficient piety, the onlookers are not attracted by such pastimes of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that only those who have completely surpassed the way of sinful reaction can engage themselves in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The entire Vedic way of ritualistic performances is to put every conditioned soul on the path of piety. By strict adherence to the prescribed principles for all orders of social life, one can attain the qualities of truthfulness, control of the mind, control of the senses, forbearance, and so on, and can be elevated to the plane of rendering pure devotional service to the Lord. Only by such a transcendental vision are one's material hankerings fully satisfied. When the Lord was present, persons who were able to satisfy their material hankerings by seeing him in true perspective were thus able to go back with him to his kingdom. But those persons who were unable to see the Lord as he is remained attached to material hankerings and were not able to go back home, back to Godhead. When the Lord passed beyond the vision of all, he did so in his original eternal form, as stated in this verse. The Lord left in his own body. He did not leave his body as is generally misunderstood by the conditioned souls. This statement defeats the false propaganda of the faithless non-devotees that the Lord passed away like an ordinary conditioned soul. The Lord appeared in order to release the world from the undue burden of the non-believing asuras, and after doing this, he disappeared from the world's eyes. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatarishnarine Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtang Shtapitang Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyahang Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Ragana Tanvatam Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindabaneshwari Rishabhanu Satidevi Pranamami Haripriya Vancha Kalpatarubhya Shah Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaurabhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're continuing this interaction of Vidura with Uddhava. And the main point that's being made, Prabhupada said the word avitripta drisham is very important. We, in the conditioned state, tend to only believe what our senses give us information of, what we can see, what we can hear, what we can touch. The knowledge acquiring senses, whatever information they give us, that's what we trust more than anything else. But that approach to living can be so easily, it can be easily shown that that is insufficient for gaining meaningful, factual knowledge, even of this world, what to speak of what lies beyond this world. Example that's used a lot is example of the sun. The sun, we heard from modern science, no one of us here can prove it, 1,500 times larger than the earth, but can we prove that? Or is it 15,000 times? Anyway, it's much larger than the earth, but can we prove that? No, we accept what we've heard from modern science, because when we look at the sun in the sky, it looks like a little disk. None of us can, from this point of view, measure the sun's actual size, diameter. So we have to accept from hearing. And if the authorities are correct, the ones that we accept, then our information is correct. Example Prabhupada used in that regard is that of the little boy and his father. The little boy sees his father wearing a watch. He asks, "Daddy, what's that?" Father tells him it's a watch. What is a watch? It's used for keeping track of time, so I can know what time it is. So now, wherever the little boy goes, and he points at a watch, you know what that is? That's a watch. He's right. He doesn't have any understanding of the inner workings of the watch, but he's correct. He knows what this is. It's a watch. So similarly, if we get information about this world and what lies beyond from reliable authority or authoritative sources, then we actually know. We actually know. The other example that the sun is used for is that the sun is one, but it has many names. Wherever you go in the world, they have a different name for the sun. Here in America, in English, we say sun. Across the border, they say El Sol. In France, they say Le Soleil. In Croatia, kako kaže sun? Sunce. Yes, da. Voila. So everywhere you go in the world, that sun has a different name, but it's the same object. Nobody would argue about that. It's the same object. I may have a different, same thing. God, the Supreme Being, source of everything, is one. But depending on your source of vision, your angle of vision, your tradition, you may have a different name for God. Last class we were mentioning how many names of Arjuna Krishna used in the Bhagavad Gita. Who remembers how many? Who remembers? Come on. I went to such great trouble to do research to tell you how many names Krishna used for Arjuna. Not 12, it was more than that. Okay. Now, I'm not going to tell you because that means you're not paying attention. Fortunately, in New Dwarka, all the classes are recorded, so you can go back on our YouTube channel and you can see all the... Yes? They say people from former Yugoslavia are very intelligent, very smart. So, 22. Krishna used 22 different names. So, after class, one very intelligent devotee here said, no, it's actually 23. There's, in the 18th chapter at the end, last verse, there's the name Dhanurdhara. But I told that person, Mataji, no, because that name was used by Sanjaya, not by Krishna. You see? Krishna used 22 names for Arjuna. That 23rd name was used by Sanjaya, not by Krishna. Who knows that verse? Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partha, Dhanurdhara, Tatta Shri Vijaya Bhutir, Dhruvam Nitra, Matir Mama. So that is Sanjaya speaking, not Krishna. So anyway, the point is that there are many different names for different objects. Just like, again, any object you take, I've traveled around the world, so I know probably, 50 names per apple. But it's the same fruit. So we can't get hung up about the name that we have for God, whether it's Allah, Yahweh, Jehovah, whatever. It's the same person. Now, here in this verse, it's being mentioned that that God, that Supreme Being, when He comes, He appears in this world, and then He also disappears. But just as His existence was not created by His appearance, He existed before His appearance, so He continues to exist after His disappearance. Very, very easy to understand. The example Prabhupada used in that regard is a window. You're standing at a window, and a horse goes by. So all of a sudden you see a horse, and then after a second or two you don't see the horse. So obviously the horse existed before you could see it, and the horse continues to exist after you can't see it. Very, very simple to understand. So the existence of a particular object or person or any kind of manifestation is not dependent on our seeing it. It's not that it only exists when we can see it. So very simple to understand. A child can understand. So God's existence has nothing to do with whether we can see God or not. Very simple. Now you come to the point again of gross and subtle manifestations. Grossly, we can see with our eyes, we can see each other, we can see the floor, the wall, the ceiling, etc. So we accept their existence. But there are so many things that we can't see that are in this room. The example I like to use, especially when I'm speaking in college circles, is every one of us in this room right now, we're breathing. Breathing means you're taking air, but you're extracting oxygen. Oxygen is what the body needs. So anybody here sitting can see the oxygen in the room? Anybody here? Can you see the oxygen? No. Does it mean it doesn't exist? No. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean it's not vital. You see? It's a vital substance, oxygen. Every one of us, if the oxygen were taken out of this room, would gradually just pass out. So it's a vital substance, but you can't see it. You can't just so to say that God doesn't exist because I can't see Him is foolish. And to say, all right, even if He exists, so what? Doesn't make any... No. God's existence is vital to our existence. Without His existence, we don't exist. Because we are part and parcel of God. And He's maintaining us. Maintenance, we cannot deny. Everything has to be maintained. Our bodies. But beyond the gross body, there's subtle body. Mind, intelligence, and ego that we cannot see with our gross material vision. Again, doesn't mean they don't exist. Everybody knows mind. The mind is always churning. Every one of us is thinking. And those thoughts cause us to feel. Depending on how you think of somebody, you have feeling about that person. So if you're thinking favorably about dear Lalita, then when you see dear, say, hey, Haribol, dear, what's happening? You try to have some favorable, pleasant interaction. But if you're not thinking favorable about it, if you think this rascal, then when you see him, you don't have to say anything. He already feels that you don't like him. So our interaction with each other and with the world in general depends on how we feel. And how we feel about each other and the world in general is dependent on how we think. So Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness, means, first of all, being trained how to think. Because if you think properly, then you will develop proper feelings, and then you will act properly. You won't even have to be prompted. One who is trained to think properly interacts with the world properly because they understand this basic point, that the world, everything in it, gross and subtle, are manifestations of the Supreme Lord. Everything, gross and subtle, are emanations, energies of the Supreme Lord. So if I'm trying to approach the Supreme Lord in love, then I have to approach the energies also in the same way. Doesn't mean that every interaction is going to be pleasant just because I'm thinking pleasantly. No. Example we use is you don't go to the LA Zoo to try to preach to the tigers and lions. That may not work out. Your intentions may be great. A few years back, there was some, we say in Hindi, Pagla Baba, some insane person, went to a zoo, I think it was in Bangalore, two guys, drunk like skunks. So the first one climbs over the tiger's enclosure, and he's sitting in front of the tiger. Goes up to the tiger, sits down. Tiger's name was Shiva. And first Shiva didn't do anything, but then, because that's his nature. It's not because you have peaceful intentions or curiosity that things are going to work out the way you want. So the second guy jumped over to save his friend, and he got killed, and the friend escaped. So his intentions were good. He wanted to save his friend, but he lost his life. Because Shiva was not in a playful mood. Just because you want to play with a tiger doesn't mean the tiger is going to want to play with you. Or the tiger's play may be so rough that you don't survive. So similarly, we have to be trained to understand that this whole material manifestation is like a tiger or tigress. And even though we may have a playful attitude towards Krishna's material energy, the material energy may not have a playful attitude towards you. Because you're not controlling the material energy. It doesn't matter how powerful you think your thoughts are. You're not going to control the weather. You're not going to control. Many foolish people get high on something and they think they can control the material elements. And you can't. You're still a tiny individual jiva. So you don't have the power to control Krishna's energy. Davyesha gunamayi mama maya duratya. We cannot control Krishna's material energy. So we shouldn't try. But if we take shelter, if we take shelter of Krishna, who is the factual controller of, then wonderful things can happen. Wonderful things can happen. We know the Goswamis in Vrindavan, they were living outside, under trees. So they were exposed to the elements, and back then, 500 years ago, in Vrindavan, there were lots of tigers. Throughout India, there were probably a tiger every square meter. There were so many of them. Later on, the British came. Back then, there were real Kshatriyas. So people tried to live in peace with nature. Of course, if an animal became problematic, then the Kshatriya had to go and take care of it. That was part of the duty of the Kshatriyas. Any wild animal that was started to disturb human beings, the Kshatriya would come and face them, not throw a bomb at them or something, face them with sword and shield and kill them, whether it's a rhino or a tiger or whatever, or a rogue elephant. The Kshatriya had to be able to subdue that animal. But over time, people just became less and less pious. Like stated in this verse, that piety is required to understand and see things clearly. So people became less pious and they became aggressive towards the wild animals. Especially when the British came, they practically wiped out all of the wild animals, especially the tigers. So we have to be trained how to think, how to see Krishna's energy properly, and then we will interact with Krishna's energy properly, and we will understand that Krishna did not die just like we go through death. Even for us, there's no birth and death. Najayate marite vakadachin. But we are currently incarcerated in a material body that we have to give up at some point. That's called death. But when Krishna comes to this material world, it's not like that. He doesn't take on a material body that has to die. No, he comes in his original form, and Ajopi Sanavayatma, Bhutanam Isharopi San. Prakiting Samadhishtaya, Sambhavami, Atmamaya. This comes in his original form. And again, when we don't see him, doesn't mean he's not existing. He comes and stays for a number of years or whatever, and then he disappears. But he's still existing. And he leaves behind him instructions that can elevate our consciousness to the point where we can actually see him again, face to face, constantly. So this is our aspiration, that if we satisfy Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by satisfying his representative, then the day will come when we will again be allowed to see Krishna face to face, dance with Krishna. That painting used to be here, not anymore, of the cowherd boys sitting with Krishna and taking prasadam. Just like we sit together, or we don't anymore. We used to sit together. Now everybody has to go home because of COVID. But sit together, have prasadam with Krishna, dance with Krishna, talk to Krishna. As Prabhupada said, in this very room, these deities are not stone. They were waiting to talk to you. But do we want to talk to them? Or do we want to just stay on the subtle plane and speculate about what we should do and what we should not do? So the main takeaway is, again, that there are different levels of existence. There's a gross material level that we interact with our gross senses. There's subtle level, mind, intelligence, and ego. Some souls are in subtle bodies, even in this material world, like we know, ghosts. But not only ghosts, there are other living entities in the material world that are in just their subtle bodies. And if we are trained properly, and we become more and more sensitive to the subtler aspects of existence. I remember in 1996, I was in Oslo, Norway, just arrived. First, I was going all over Scandinavia. So first went to Sweden, and then flew from Sweden to Denmark, Copenhagen, then stayed there for a while, and took a train from Copenhagen to Oslo. So the very night I arrived, they had a very beautiful temple there at that point. It's no longer there. I was sleeping, and about just after midnight I woke up. I was just such a heavy vibration of pain and suffering, like a lot of people were suffering. I could literally hear the screams. And I woke up, I was like, what's going on? And everything was fine at the temple. I didn't disturb anybody, but I looked out. It didn't seem to be anything happening at the temple itself. So gradually fell asleep. And then the next morning, I asked the devotees, did something happen? Something. I told them about what happened to me. And they said, yeah, last night a plane crashed at the airport. There was a plane coming in from Russia and landed at the airport and crashed, and everybody on board, I think it was 112 people, something like that, they all died. So if you're sensitive, we should be sensitive not only to what's happening on the gross platform, but on the subtle material platform, and then beyond that on the spiritual platform. So this is what Uddhava was experiencing. It's stated. He was beyond gross and subtle material levels. He was on the spiritual level, even though his body was still in the material world. So that's called Jivan Mukta, and every one of us can achieve that by proper execution of devotional service. By the mercy of the spiritual master, we can become Jivan Mukta, where we're liberated even while we're in this body. We're still apparently in the material world, but we're not actually here. So this is what the pure devotees go through, like Uddhava. He was, after Krishna's departure, apparently still here in this world, but he was with Krishna on this spiritual platform. Okay, we can stop here. Any questions, comments? Yes, Ananda Kirtan. Prabhu.
So like the last couple of sentences, you said that by the mercy of the spiritual master, we can become jivan mukta, liberated. So I've been wondering how that works. Is it that if you serve the spiritual master, that the spiritual master has like a relationship with Krishna, and he says, okay, this soul has, done nice service, please let him in? Or is it that perhaps even if the spiritual master doesn't speak to Krishna like that, Krishna just sees like, okay, this soul's been trying to follow the process of bhakti yoga, which means that he's serving the guru, okay, I'll bring him back? Or is it that the spiritual master is basically just meant to train you so that at the time of death you're able to fly your own plane? Or is it like all three kind of like mixed? And
The living entity is by nature pure. In other words, our normal existence, our non-diseased state of existence is pure spiritual consciousness, pure servant of Krishna. That's our normal. So we've fallen into this material world. We've voluntarily come here. We're covered now by the modes of material nature, and those modes are controlled by Krishna. So Krishna can remove the covering of the modes of nature at any time that he desires, which puts you back in your normal Krishna conscious state. So that can happen anytime. Generally the process is, as Krishna says, one who says he's my devotee is not my devotee, but one who's the devotee of my devotee is actually my devotee. So by becoming a devotee of Krishna, it pleases Krishna. And when he's fully pleased, of course he's Swarat, he's independent. He doesn't have to, it's not like, a formula like some people think. If I chant the Hare Krishna mantra X amount of times, I will become pure. It's not a numerical thing. It's not by numerical strength. Yes, you have to chant counting, but it's not that you reach a certain count and then you're pure. So when Krishna is pleased by your attitude, and that attitude, as I was stating, is driven by your desire, and your desire is driven by your state of consciousness. So Krishna is responding to your desire, fulfilling all desires. This is Krishna's business because he's in control of everything and everyone. So if you have an actual deep desire to go back to Godhead, to come back to the pure state of existence, Krishna was willing to fulfill that. He wants you on that state. So it's actually fueled by your desire, not just by mechanically serving your spiritual master or mechanically chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. But what is your actual desire? If while mechanically chanting Hare Krishna, you're actually desiring tremendous sense gratification, and Krishna will give you that. That's why Prabhupada scared us when he said, if you have a pinch of material desire, at the time of death, Krishna will fulfill that. So everybody was scared. So then Prabhupada gave, okay, 90% pure, whatever. 80, 75, 60, whatever. Try. And the point is you have to strive for it. If you're not striving for purity, if you're not striving to go back to Godhead, then why will Krishna take you back to Godhead? It'll be like a disturbance. I'm striving to go back to Godhead, supposedly, externally, but internally, I want to be known as the best whatever in this material world. So Krishna will give you that. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, Krishna will much more readily give you your material desires if that's what you really want. He's not going to force you to come back to Godhead. So the whole thing is fueled by your desire. What do you, Ananda Kirtan, actually want? So if you actually want Krishna, but due to conditioning you still have some problems, Krishna will gradually or immediately, up to him, remove that conditioning so you come back to that pure state, because that's what you're demonstrating that you really want. But if while I'm chanting Hare Krishna, I really want material success, just like I told the story last time, the parents will die and leave you $1 million, and then you'll take off the neck beads and throw away the bead bag and you'll be out the door. Because that's what you really wanted. You were just biding time, Hare Krishna, until the money came. So Krishna's in your heart. He knows that. Okay. Either your parents will die and leave you millions of dollars, or a friend of yours from high school will win the lottery and out of the blue give you $10 million. You will get that because that's what you really wanted. So that's the test. Tests come in two ways. Extreme problems, physical pain, and the government giving you trouble, other people giving you trouble, just like our poor devotees in Kazakhstan. Not any fault of theirs. There was some, rioting and stuff going on, but they were affected by it. I just found out yesterday that things are more or less back to normal. with the devotees. So extreme tests can be there. Ill health, you go out on Sankirtan, some guy just comes up and punches you. It happens. So that's one extreme. Generally, when that kind of extreme comes, if you have a little pinch of piety, a little pinch of devotion, you take shelter. Oh, Krishna, please protect me. But then the other extreme test is extreme wealth and opportunities for sense gratification. When those come, not so easy to take shelter, you see? We don't automatically take shelter of Krishna when the $10 million comes. We think, okay, I should give something. I'll give $5,000 and then I'm out the door. Like that. So we get tested in those two extremes. Will we pass both tests? That is the question for all of us. Ransaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai.